enjoying this hot weather, I'm sure, right? I had the pleasure of working outside most of the week until about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and then I was done. So took some time off, did some stuff around the house, and I'm absolutely wore out. I have to go back to work to relax. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. You can? All right. Well, I do. It's terrible. Who said home ownership was easy? It's not. Whew. Yeah, yard work and everything else, and maintenance, and oh yeah. This is true. All right. Well, let's get serious, I guess. Brother Dwayne, you want to pray for the offering?
Lord Jesus, for allowing us to come to your house to praise your name, Lord.
Jesus. Amen. All right. That was the easy part, right? Now I got to teach. You can't hear me? Sorry. Oh. I'm trying to move that up. I got my hearing aids in, so I hear myself very well. Sorry. All right. I have read over this lesson for quite a few times, and I'm hoping that I can bring something to this. Over the last several lessons that I've taught, I've been concentrating out of the manual here has been on the Beatitudes. So this is a continuation from that. Okay? And it's covering the topic that many of us, I won't say most, I myself being one of them, have a problem with. And that is loving your enemy. I hear some giggles, so I think some other people are with me on this. Is it easy to love your enemy? Not all, because you have to get your flesh out of the way, right? And that's the hard part, isn't it? Well, I'd be careful, because somebody will come your way that you may not necessarily get along well with. But you're easy to get along with. I can sometimes be a knucklehead. I can be very difficult, and so sometimes that causes problems with the people I'm interacting with. But let's first get to the text, Matthew 5, 38 through 48. I'm hoping to get through the lesson and cover all this. The lesson brought out a lot of different aspects that I had not thought about. In contemplating the lesson, I had to reflect on my own self, of course, and there's a lot of areas in my life that I don't quite measure up yet. Okay? But let's read, and then we'll cover this, okay? Verse 38. You have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man shall sue thee at the law, take away thy coat. Let him have thy cloak also. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. You have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth the rain on the just and the unjust. For if ye love them that which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. And that last verse is what we want to focus on. Being perfect, like our Father. Of course, they're talking about God, Jesus here. The thought here is Jesus calls us to live in unselfishly and to forsake our desires for revenge. Kind of an interesting thought there. How many people here have contemplated revenge after somebody has done something? I would suspect almost everybody's hand should be up, or more than one hand, right? How many has, well, no, don't raise your hand on this one. How many has acted on that? I would suspect many of us. We've all get into situations where somebody does something wrong and we figure out ways to get back at them. I'm the second of 6 kids. I have 4 younger brothers and an older sister. Do you think kids get back at each other? Oh yeah, we learned that real young, don't we? My brother took my toy, and what am I going to do? I take his or break one of his. Okay, right? But that's not necessarily the way we're supposed to live, is it? The Sermon on the Mount provides a wonderful explanation of Jesus' agenda for the coming kingdom of heaven. This much anticipated kingdom began with the arrival of the King. Jesus' first sermon was about repenting from the old ways in preparation for the new kingdom. So how do we prepare for the kingdom of heaven? How should we live? If someone were to write a book about your life, what would they say? These are questions we need to ask ourselves, right? You don't have to vocalize them. But those are things that we should contemplate, right? Many people today look forward to the coming of Jesus without paying attention to how they live today. Before we discuss the passage that I read, let's look at where humanity started from and the steps God has taken us through, okay? Some of the old covenant traditions. We all know in the beginning Adam and Eve had a close relationship with God, right? God would come down in the cool of the day. I like the cool of the day, right? Especially after working outside. I don't know how John Daniel does what he does. He's outside almost all the time, or if he's inside, it's in an attic. Summer's got to be rough on him. But the cool of the day is nice, isn't it? I enjoy that. So in the cool of the day, God would come down and commune with Adam and Eve. They would talk to him. And then, of course, we know that this relationship was severed when Adam and Eve sinned. After that, there was a long period of time before the law was given to Moses, right, and Israel. What happened between that? Between the fall and the giving of the law? Didn't man do what they wanted to do? There was nothing written as to what was good or what was bad. How well did that work? Right? Human nature took over, didn't it? So, human nature takes over and somebody hurts me or my family. I'm going to try to revenge that hurt, right? And usually it's not just to get equal, right? It's usually to do worse. Doesn't that create a spiral of worse activity? We'll get into that. Were we, mankind, able to live up to the standard that was given to Moses. At Mount Sinai, the Lord spoke to Moses and gave him the Ten Commandments and a lot of other do's and don'ts. Was mankind able to live up to that? Why and how did mankind change the law to benefit himself? Did we change it? Did Israel change the law as time went on? It looks at me kind of weird, don't they? Well, if you look at it, a lot of times there were things that they changed. And why would they change it? To benefit themselves in some way. They used to get all over people. Well, Jesus said it, right? You put things on widows and orphans and that you yourself wouldn't do. He commented about the priests at the time who put too much on other people and yet didn't worry about the weightier matters. Remember that passage? Are you familiar with that? So it's obvious that things were changed along the ways. What was God's intention for mankind? It's to commune with us, right? In a loving relationship. So wasn't the law supposed to help guide man back to God? But in the end, what did it do? It didn't. It gave us a set of rules. It told us where the boundaries were at. But was Israel close to God when Jesus came into on the earth? Why? I would suspect it would be mankind and our will to be to take care of ourselves rather than others. Okay, selfishness, self-centered, right? Anybody have to battle with that? Don't answer my questions. Just consider this. I know I have to be careful because I can be very self-centered. I can be very selfish. I can be very short when something doesn't go my way, right? I don't know anybody else, but I can talk about myself, When we look at this, the covenant, the law, set parameters of a holy arrangement. Mount Sinai's temporary solution pointed the way to the ultimate solution, but it was unable to change the nature of a fallen humanity. Israel failed to live within the established boundaries. The old covenant was not the problem, was it? The old covenant was fine. But human traditions turned righteousness into unrighteousness. One of the aspects in the passage I wrote about, or read, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Is that a bad standard? Why? Okay. Okay. I can understand that too. But if you look prior to the law, and the fact that mankind liked to extract revenge on somebody, having a standard that says you can only go this far is better than where we were before. To set boundaries. Does that make sense? Okay. Before that, what would you do? Anything, and there's a lot of examples, right, about that. Prior to the eye for an eye code, humans tended toward escalating retaliation. Are there some examples? Can anybody think of any examples? Okay. That was part of the law. So I wouldn't say that was an escalation, but that would be extracting. So where was the guy? That part wasn't very fair, was it? Yes, exactly. What about Jacob's sons and Shechem, in Shechem? The mistreatment of their daughter, or their sister, excuse me. What happened there? They were living next to some another nation, another set of people, and one of the princes took advantage of their sister, and then they didn't just go in and extract. They didn't just do what was an eye for an eye, did they? They went a lot worse than that. In fact, they wiped out everybody and took all their stuff. Okay? What about a more recent example? Okay? Go ahead and explain. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. This is true. This is true. He was without sin. And a lot of that has to be with jealousy and all sorts of other things. Yes, Christ is a good example. I was thinking a little bit more recent. Anybody heard of Hatfield McCoys? Everybody's laughing. You've heard of them. Over a pig, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. There was a trial, and whoever was accused was actually acquitted. And yet, it started a series of events that almost wiped out both families, right? So we can see where revenge can go way beyond whatever the initial offense was. So by putting at Mount Sinai and in the law, by putting in the eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth code, that helped restrict how much somebody should expect back from an offense. Does that make sense? Okay. Mount Sinai covenant replaced escalating retaliation with a higher principle of justice. An eye for an eye rule also protected the weak. Now, how was that? Prior to the law, who told everybody what was going to happen, or wasn't it the strong that was in control of everything? Well, this is prior to the law. So this was, when man did all that he wanted, whatever he wanted, whatever was good in his eyes. And so who was the ones in charge? The strong, right? What about that widow that the king came and took all her stuff? Where was the justice for her? Prior to the law, there was none. So by putting in the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, that helped protect the weak. It also caused those that were strong and violent to be unnoticed, because now there's supposed to have been justice. Does that make sense? Okay. And it also took the action away from the parties that were harmed and put it into somebody else's hands, a judge. When we look at our society, we were established off of Christian Judeo values, and this is one of them. A judge and a set of rules that we're supposed to follow, and when somebody does something against another, they have recourse to get recompense for that error. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Because as a society, the laws and the rules that govern our society is the only thing that keeps us together. I can think back when, what was it? The guy from China. Mongols ruled and would come through and just wipe out a village. Genghis Khan, there you go. Yeah. There was no rule there, was it? Survival of the fittest, right? What would our society be like if that was the way it was? Many of us wouldn't be sitting here, right? we wouldn't be able to have possessions, would we? Okay? And that's one of the freedoms I enjoy here in the U.S. Okay? Also, in the covenant, there were statements about loving your neighbor. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that, right? Before that, it's if you don't like your neighbor, what do? The strong survive. Just take out your neighbor and you'll be okay, right? Really, there was pre-law. There was no arguments over fence lines, were there? You just wipe them out, right? Who cares about the fence line, right? But that's not a way we're supposed to act towards one another. That's not what God wanted in the garden, did he? He wanted us. He wanted a love relationship, and as people, as his creation, we're supposed to love one another. But because of the fall, that's not the way we were. That's not the way we are, I should say. Okay? So in the law was the statements about loving one another. But what did mankind do with that? If I'm supposed to love my neighbor, the opposite should also apply, right? I should be able to hate my enemies. Was that in the law? No, but we twisted it. Or mankind twisted it. Israel twisted that. And all of a sudden now now if you're my enemy, I can just take you out if I wanted to, right? Okay? Because I can love my neighbor, but I also can hate my enemies, right? And so, but that's not what God wanted, is it? He wants a loving relationship with mankind. And so he put in his law the concepts of loving one another and loving God. Now, that's not very easy, is it? People are not always amenable or likable, or I can be very, no, I won't go there. We all can have bad days. Yesterday was not a good day. Okay? And my wife's here, so I have to choose my words careful. Mount Sinai covenant included many elements related to the love of one another. When Israel settled in the Promised Land, they were supposed to care for one another, right? Some of the things that they were supposed to do is leave the corners of the fields left, right? So that others could come by and glean what was left over, right? And that was to help the stranger. And a reminder that they were strangers in Egypt, right? How well did that work for them? Not very good. Why? We're selfish, aren't we? Exactly. What's mine is mine, right? And why should I share that with anybody, right? Well, yeah. There's an old saying, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. In the 70s, they say, do unto others, then split. And that reminds me of our selfishness, isn't it? But when we don't leave for others and we are selfish, how can God bless us if we're not blessing others? Okay? So in reality, when we become self-centered, we actually end up losing out with what God wants to do through us. Does that make sense? There are a couple examples in the Old Testament about how Israel did help others. Can we help our enemy? Okay, we can. We can. Can anybody give me an example of when Israel helped their enemy? Exactly. Yes. And what happened there? There's a lot of examples where Mhm. Mhm. Right. And that's when they were separating from Egypt. Yes. Uh, but in the examples I was looking for, it's more in the lines where there's an unnamed this unnamed maiden knew God um, and told her captors about the healing that from the prophet that the general could get. And Naaman took that information in, went to Israel, and was healed. Right? Now, if I'm a captor, if I'm captive in a strange land, am I thinking about the benefits of the people that have me captive? But we should, right? Elisha, he was surrounded, right? And God blinded all the enemy that was around him. What could he have done? He could have wiped them right out, right? Held them for ransom. But what did he do? He fed them, took care of them, ended up freeing them. Can we do something like that? Do we have it within us to look at our enemies and see their needs and help them with what they need? It's not very easy, is it? It's not, but that's what the Old Testament was teaching, isn't it? We're supposed to love all. It's not just our neighbor. And on that note, didn't Israel have a problem with defining what their neighbor was? You know, it's amazing because when you start to look at it, Israel thought it was just their family or near kinsmen, but they didn't look at the people that were strangers in their land. When Jesus was on the earth, he brought up the Good Samaritan because somebody said, well, who's my neighbor, right? He thought he was pretty smug. I read that and it's like, I can be sarcastic. I could have probably said that, you know. No, who is my neighbor? You know, I'll help somebody, but who is it? You know. But that's the way it should be, right? I can tell you, I've walked past people that I knew needed help. I can tell you, I drove past them on a corner. So it's not always an easy thing to put into practice, is it? Let's get back to revenge. God's law of an eye for an eye provided a redemptive lift that brought equity before magistrates in place of escalating vengeance, right? But sinful human nature changed the law of equalizing justice into an evil-seeking revenge. Have you seen that here anytime recently? Don't you see it in our court systems today? I don't want just to get back what was my hurt, but I want to drive somebody completely out of business. We'll look at it, right? Somebody comes into a bakery and says, I want a cake for my wedding. And due to religious beliefs, the owner says, no, I can't. And they've even gone to the point where I know somebody that will be able to do that for you. But what happened in our court system? They were taken to court and driven out of business. So haven't we twisted the eye for the eye and a tooth for a tooth to extract revenge from people. We see that in a lot of different examples in our society today. So God's law was put into place at Mount Sinai to help guide us and to show us that we're supposed to love one another, what's right, what's wrong. But we as humans twisted that, right? So the central driving force shifted from obeying God's will for blessing humanity to making individuals' satisfaction the primary goal. Does that make sense? Now it's not just what will correct the error. In the Old Testament, it talks about, if I do something that kills my neighbor's cow, I'm supposed to replace that cow and all that stuff. If it was by accident, it's not as bad if it was on purpose. If it was on purpose, I'm supposed to give a little bit more than that to make up for the loss, right? But we've gone to the point where it's what do we want, to what will satisfy us, not what's right, not what will make it okay for the injured party, but what is satisfactory to the person, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Somebody cuts me off in traffic, and now I have the right to shoot him. I mean, you're right. It has gotten really bad. But we also have not only gone there, but we've gone to a step further. We've gone to the step of elevating personal rights above all else. That's a pretty bold statement. Can I support it? I think so. The example of the couple that wanted the cake, and the guy says no. The owner says no. It's my right to have a cake, and I want you to make it. Okay? What about other things that are happening in our society today? That it's not, it's gone from what's right or wrong, but to what my right to do what I want. Way beyond what the law first put in place. We also, when we start to look at that topic, so when I want my right over everybody else's right, that makes me better than others. Does that make sense? I get a lot of deer in the headlight looks, so I'm not sure whether I'm connecting with anybody here. If I think I'm entitled to X, does it make sense that I'm telling you that my preference, my things are more important than what you think? Does that make sense? And we look at our society and where we're at today, haven't we gone that far? In fact, a lot of times you may look at it and that can lead to groupthink or tribalism, gang mentality. I am part of this group here. We want our rights to do X. And if anybody gets in our way, we're going to stomp on them, right? It's happening here in the U.S. It's happening around the world. Look at some of the other more dangerous parts of the world. What about, was it Boca Raton? That group that went in and captured all the children? Held them for captive for, I think it's 4 or 5 years. Why? It's a tribal, gang-related mentality. we are in charge and we take what we want. And so we can see that around the world, but we can also see it here in the U.S. That's not what we're supposed to be like, is it? Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Say they think that they're better than everybody else.
Right,
In
right.
reality, ain't nobody better.
This
We're
is true.
all in the same boat, trying to strive and make it.
Right,
But they
right.
feel that they become first.
Mhm.
I'm a child of God, so I should get this
Mhm.
and I should get that. But that's the wrong type of thinking.
Right, right. And so when I bring up this topic, when we're discussing this topic, we have to watch out for our own actions that may end up projecting that type of a mentality or that type of appearance to others, right? We can sometimes think we're better than others. Oh, okay. Everybody's quiet today. What happens when we have a visitor? Or somebody doesn't quite look like what we expect them to look like? Or they have yet to develop in their walk with Christ as far as we think they should be? What kind of an attitude do we present to them? Yes. We should be expressing love no matter where they're at, no matter who they are. Exactly. Exactly.
Why you got to wait when you're at?
Don't remind me of my past. I don't want to go there anymore. Okay? But I do think about it and realize how far I've gone. And yet there's people that have just started that walk and have a long ways to go. Mhm. 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 Right, right.
So when he felt the freedom of the Lord, the presence of the Lord, he would come up to the altar and hit stand. And so he would say, I want to just young man, I want to point him out. New convert, went through the presence of the Lord. He's here early, an hour before church
Right,
begins.
right,
He's
right.
praying. He stays later than everybody else.
Right.
He loves the presence of God. And he doesn't stop dancing the whole time. It's true. He was out there dancing, worshiping. So he pointed him out. Then there was another guy that played the tambourine,
Mhm.
and he was dancing in his style.
Right,
And then Brother Emery, who's a
right, right.
stood up and danced with him. They did a duet together
Yeah.
in front of the platform.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was, they were just trying to break the paradigm of
Exactly, exactly. There was a few years ago, there was another gentleman that was coming here, and unfortunately, he's not here anymore. But the youth at the time, several of the youth, used to videotape him and make fun of how he worshiped. And that always bothered me because how he worships is between him and God. And it shouldn't be anybody else. And each of us are different. Some of us are more reserved, and some of us are more open and expressive. Okay, so yeah. In the passage I read, also, if we go a little bit further, let me see where it is. Talks about Hang in there with me. I'll find what I'm looking for. Seem to find it. There was a issue going on at the time. You know, Rome was in charge of or had captured Israel, and Israel was subjective to Rome. And one of the things that Rome did, if a Roman soldier had to travel somewhere, they could point to somebody and said, "You're going to carry my stuff." Okay? And what the rule at the time, okay, yeah, here is it, 41. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. What that was referring to is those soldiers would tell the population and say, you know, I need help. Because usually they have all their armor and they have their sword and everything else that they need for battle, plus their personal stuff. And they could just point to somebody and say, take it, carry it for me. As being a captive, what kind of an attitude would most people have? Not very good, right? But we're supposed to love our enemies, aren't we? So if we're supposed to love our enemies, and here Jesus told them, if they compel you to go a mile, go 2. That was a kind of a hard thing to tell people, right? At that time, it wasn't like you just hopped in your car and you drove down the road, right? I mean, hot, dry, and you're carrying somebody else's, you're captive, their stuff, okay? You could have had all sorts of things going on that day, but in this case, you were told to pick it up and take it. Well, Jesus tells us to go twice. So when we're looking at vengeance, we're looking at our enemy, we're looking at those that have despitefully used you, what can we do to help them? I came back from a conference. I was down in San Diego the week before last. And reading over this, there's a couple of people down there that are in charge of the association that we don't see eye to eye very often. We butt heads quite a bit. I don't call them my enemy, but they're not my friend. Okay? So the question is what can I do to help them even though they're just a big thorn in my side? I don't want to say what I want. I won't say what I really want to say, but they are nothing but a thorn in my side. What can I do to help them? I thought about that, you know. What would cause somebody to have such an attitude towards others? And it wasn't just me. They have the attitude towards everybody. We all have a background, a life, right? We have come, and we are an accumulation of all of our experiences. That's what has made us and brought us to where we are today. And my thought was, what in their background made them a real jerk? What hurt did they go through that could have caused them to now react like they do? I'll never know. I'll never know. But that really has changed my way of looking at people. None of us are ourselves in a vacuum. In other words, we've gone through things that brought us to the point where we are not today. And so how we interact with others is a result of everything that we've gone through in the past. So if somebody's being a jerk, the question is wow, what happened in their past that had caused them to be that way?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And his neighbor's Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to
Yep. Yep.
becomes a doctor nevertheless, and he tries to help his own country. But Israel is not going to was 4 of his daughters. He
Oh,
had 7 children.
yeah.
4 of his daughters died, and in the end of the story, he's trying to help Israel comprehend they're not bad people.
Right, right.
And he
Yes. Bitter rivalries that have lasted centuries.
and he is still working in the Israeli hospitals.
Right,
And they love him, but they can't love his people.
right.
And he now is, his wife died, his 4 daughters died.
It's tough. I pray that I never have to go through anything like that.
Yes.
That is a pretty big extreme. But we all have people that cross our paths that are less than friendly. Okay? And based off of what we read at the beginning, we are supposed to love our enemies. We're supposed to pray for our enemies. We're supposed to help those that, let's see, where does it, despitefully use you. Exactly. And in the end, if we are able to do that, we will shine Christ's light and love in their life. And if you look at Israel, wasn't that what they were supposed to have done? God chose them out of all the other people and gave them a lot of information and blessing and the land. And in turn, they were supposed to help those others, the strangers. If they would have been kind and generous to all those that were around them, do you think they would be in the same position as they are today? Probably not. And when Jesus came, he rebuked them because of their attitude towards one another and towards those people that were around them. We can take that lesson into ourselves and look at it and think, what can we do to help those that are around us? Not just our neighbors, not just our friends, but everybody. It's not always easy, is it? There's a couple of questions at the end here I want to see. How did you respond the last time someone attacked you in a way that made you feel shame? How did you respond? How does the response measure up to Jesus' call to release the desires to retaliate or to defend yourself for your personal rights? Those questions are kind of tough ones. Each of us will have to answer ourselves. And if we're able to set aside the hurt and focus on the person and the eternal desire of God to shine his love into their life, what can we do to help them? That's what we have to take away and consider, because we may be the only Jesus that they see. And so we need to take every opportunity. Sometimes it's hard to bite our tongues and say nothing. Sometimes it's hard to be kind to somebody that just was a jerk to you. But that's what we are commanded to do. We stand. Yeah, quick. I'm told. Oh. And it's our human nature to react based off of how we're being addressed. So it is very tough to bite our tongue and do what we're supposed to. Can we stand? Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for your word and your truth. We thank you for the love that you have shown us in your word and in saving our souls. Help us, Lord, as we go through our life to shine your light, your love, your mercy into the lives of those around us, whether they're our friends, family, or neighbors, whoever they may be, whether they've wronged us or not. Help us to shine your light and your love in their life and to help them through whatever situations that they're going through. Pray this in Jesus' name.